The door is shut tight. No light, no voices. Inside that dark room, a man lies completely still. His beard and hair overgrown, fingernails long, his frail body wrapped in layers of tissue paper. He is not a prisoner. He has not been abandoned. This is a man who could buy the entire hotel, perhaps even the city beyond that closed door. He is Howard Hughes, one of the richest men in America, owner of airlines, Hollywood studios, and billion-dollar defense contracts. Yet in this moment, he does not dare touch the doorknob. He does not dare let the light in. He does not dare allow the world to see that fear has won. Money is piled around him, but wealth offers no safety. Power that once forced governments to listen can no longer help him step outside the room. Howard Hughes lives in silence, imprisoned by his own mind. How could a genius who conquered the skies be defeated by invisible obsessions? How can a man who once controlled an empire lose control of himself? This story is not just about money. It is about humanity, and the price paid when ambition exceeds what the human soul can endure. Howard Hughes was not born into poverty, but he was born into loneliness. Howard Robert Hughes Jr. was born in 1905 in Houston, Texas, into a wealthy and highly ambitious family. His father was a successful inventor in the oil drilling industry, a man who believed absolutely in discipline, efficiency, and control. His mother, by contrast, was sensitive, anxious, and deeply obsessed with illness and health. From that household, two opposing worlds took root in Hughes's mind from a very early age. Howard's childhood was unlike that of other children. He did not play outside. He did not blend into crowds. Instead, he spent long hours indoors, under his mother's constant supervision. She obsessively checked his health, monitoring every smallest sign. A slight cough was enough to alarm her. A tiny scratch was treated as a potential danger. Howard grew up believing that the outside world was filled with risk. His mother did not intend to harm him. She loved Howard in her own way, but that love was wrapped in fear. And fear, repeated year after year, became the foundation for the obsessions that would later consume him. Hughes's father brought a different influence. He demanded absolute excellence from his son. No mediocrity, no mistakes. Howard was taught that success was not a choice, it was an obligation, and that to survive, one had to be stronger than everyone else. Caught between a mother who feared the world and a father who sought to conquer it, Howard Hughes learned to live through intellect rather than emotion. The boy quickly showed exceptional intelligence. Howard became fascinated with machines, engines, and mechanical structures. While other children played with toys, Hughes took them apart, then reassembled and improved them. He found safety in order, in logic, in things that could be controlled by his hands and his mind. What Howard never learned was how to connect with people. He had few friends. He shared little. He showed even less emotion. Loneliness became his natural state, not painful, just silent. And in that silence, Hughes learned to rely entirely on himself. Tragedy arrived sooner than anyone expected. Hughes's mother died when he was only 16. The woman who had controlled every breath of his life suddenly vanished. Just 2 years later, his father also passed away. At 18, Howard Hughes inherited a vast fortune, but stood completely alone in the world. No one to guide him, no one to protect him, no one who truly understood him. That loss was not just grief, it was a psychological rupture. Hughes learned a brutal lesson. anyone could disappear. And that safety existed only when everything was under his own control. From that moment on, Hughes began to build a shell around himself, colder, more cautious, less trusting. He did not seek comfort. He sought power because in his mind, power was the only way to ensure he would never be hurt again. Howard Hughes's childhood did not create a madman. It created a man terrified of losing control. And that fear, quiet, persistent, and relentless, followed him throughout his life. From moments of genius to the irreversible collapses that would come later. At 18 years old, Howard Hughes did not just lose his parents. He lost the last anchor of his youth. When his father died, Howard became the sole heir to Hughes Tool Company, a business generating millions of dollars each year, thanks to a revolutionary oil drilling bit. On paper, he was one of the wealthiest young men in America. In reality, Howard was a thin, quiet young man, completely unprepared for the world of power he was about to enter. Around him, older and more experienced figures began to appear. Lawyers, partners, board members. Everyone had advice. Everyone claimed to know what was best for Howard Hughes. And for the first time in his life, he felt control slipping out of his hands. Hughes reacted in his own way. He did not rebel. He did not argue loudly. Instead, he quietly learned how the system worked. He read contracts, studied expressions, listened to the silences between words. Howard soon realized that power did not belong to those who spoke the most, but to those who knew when not to speak. At an age when many were still searching for themselves, Hughes had to learn how to protect his wealth, his reputation, and his position. He trusted no one completely. And that caution, though it isolated him, helped him survive in a world where everyone was looking for an advantage. Hughes's first truly defining decision was to leave Texas. He moved to California not only to escape the supervision of old managers, but to find a new space where he could freely test his ambitions. Hollywood was exploding at the time. Cinema was becoming America's most powerful tool of influence. Hughes saw what many others had not yet understood. Film was not just entertainment. It was soft power, a way to shape how an entire society thinks. He began investing in movies, not as a pure lover of art, but as a strategist. Hughes wanted control. The script, the camera, the angles. He became obsessed with detail, with perfection, with making sure everything matched his vision. Those around him quickly realized that Howard Hughes was not just a rich heir spending money. He intervened deeply in production. He asked endless questions. He was willing to spend whatever it took to achieve what he believed was right, and just as willing to remove anyone who made him feel he was losing control. This was Hughes's first step into the world of power. Not loud, not announced, but unmistakable. He would not allow anyone else to decide for him. Yet power came with its own price. Hughes grew increasingly closed off. He trusted fewer people, shared less. Every decision was made in isolation. And the higher he rose, the more accustomed he became to standing alone. The inherited fortune gave Hughes a foundation. But it was these early encounters with power that truly shaped the man he would become, a man who believed that safety required absolute control, even if it meant sacrificing closeness, connection, or ultimately, himself. Hollywood did not welcome Howard Hughes as a genius. It saw him as a wealthy outsider. When Hughes arrived in California, the American film industry was dominated by established mogulsmen who understood the rules of the game. understood the audience, and knew how to turn dreams into profit. Hughes was nothing like them. He was young, quiet, and he carried a fortune large enough to make everyone cautious. But Hughes did not come to Hollywood to blend in. He came to control it. The film Hell's Angels became his first and greatest ambition. Hughes rejected existing standards. He wanted the skies to be real, the airplanes to be real, the danger to be real. While other producers searched for ways to cut costs, Hughes was willing to burn millions of dollars just to reshoot a single scene if it failed to match the image in his mind. The obsession began to reveal itself. Hughes did not trust collective instinct. He trusted details, camera angles, lighting, the movement of every propeller blade. He stood on set for hours, watching, adjusting, demanding retakes. Filmmakers accustomed to industrial efficiency grew exhausted. But no one could challenge the man paying the bills. Hughes's reputation spread quickly, not just as a producer, but as a perfectionist to a dangerous extreme. Hell's Angels became a symbol of both Hughes's talent and his excess. The film was a massive success, but the cost was years of delays, relentless tension, and enormous losses. For Hughes, success was never enough. He didn't just want audiences to watch the film. He wanted them to believe in what he had created. To Hughes, Hollywood was a laboratory of power. He understood that cinema could shape America's image of itself. Who was a hero? Who was a villain? What courage looked like? What ambition meant? And if he could control the screen, he could influence how an entire society saw the world. But that soft power reflected back onto Hughes himself. He began to control the personal lives of those around him. Actors, directors, employees. Everyone was expected to follow unspoken rules. Trust became increasingly rare. Hughes did not want surprises. He did not want risk. He did not want anything that fell outside the script he had already written in his mind. Under Hollywood's lights, Hughes was admired, but behind the scenes, he remained a solitary figure. Few friends, few close relationships. Every connection was about control, not closeness. Fame did not ease Hughes's loneliness. It only made the distance between him and the world more visible. Hollywood gave Hughes a sense of power he had never known before. But it was also here that his obsessions with perfection, with absolute control, began to burrow deeper into his mind. Hughes was not just making films. He was rehearsing the way he would live his life. A life in which everything had to move according to an order only he could set. And when the studio lights went dark, Howard Hughes was still standing there, not as an artist, but as a man trying to use power to keep the world within his grasp. Hollywood gave Howard Hughes power over images, but the sky was where he believed he truly belonged. From a very young age, Hughes was obsessed with airplanes, not just for their speed, but for the feeling of leaving the ground behind. In the air, all limits seemed to disappear. No crowds, no watching eyes, no intrusion. Just him, the engine, and the open sky. Hughes did not see aviation as a rich man's hobby. He saw it as a mission, as the future, and more importantly, as a place where everything could be controlled through engineering, numbers, and absolute logic. He began investing heavily in Hughes aircraft. No compromise. No following old paths. Hughes demanded standards many engineers considered unrealistic. Aircraft had to be faster, lighter, more stable, safer. Every detail was examined to an extreme degree. But Hughes did not remain on the sidelines giving orders. He stepped into the cockpit himself. Test flights became a personal ritual. Hughes believed that only by experiencing the risk firsthand could he truly understand the limits of machines and of human beings. In the moment the plane lifted off the ground, he felt something money and fame had never given him: absolute freedom. Records were broken. Faster flights, longer distances, greater heights. The press celebrated Hughes as the embodiment of the American pioneering spirit, a man who refused limits, willing to challenge nature with intellect and willpower. Yet beneath that glory, the old obsessions remained. Hughes grew increasingly perfectionistic. Every technical flaw, no matter how small, robbed him of sleep. He viewed mistakes as direct threats, not only to a flight's safety, but to the entire world he was trying to control. Trust in people steadily declined. Trust in machines increased, as long as those machines followed his designs exactly. The Hercules project, the massive flying boat, later known as the Spruce Goose, became the ultimate symbol of that boundless ambition. Hughes staked his reputation, his fortune, and his health on a machine many believed was madness. But to him, it was more than an aircraft. It was a declaration that humans could accomplish what seemed impossible. The pressure mounted. The government watched. The military placed expectations. The media waited for failure. Hughes stood alone at the center of it all, carrying the weight of being seen as both a genius and a reckless dreamer. And it was during this period that cracks began to appear. Hughes's body grew exhausted. His mind stretched thin. He worked relentlessly, slept little, ate irregularly. The sky gave him freedom, but the ground pulled him back down with the heavy gravity of responsibility and fear of failure. Howard Hughes flew higher than anyone else. But the higher he rose, the more dangerous the fall became. This chapter of Hughes's life was the peak of ambition, a man who believed that if he could conquer the sky, he could conquer everything else. And yet, that very belief was leading him toward a turning point from which there would be no return. The accident came without warning. Just like the fear that had long been waiting inside Howard Hughes's mind. That day, Hughes piloted the experimental aircraft himself, not because he needed to prove anything to the world, but because he trusted no one else to be careful enough. In the sky, everything initially went according to plan. The engine roared. The air trembled. Hughes was intensely focused, his eyes never leaving the control panel. Then, in a single instant, everything slipped beyond control. The aircraft lost stability. Impact. Descent. The sound of tearing metal echoed through the sky. Hughes was violently thrown. His body slammed against the frame of the plane. Pain. Chaos. And then darkness. When he regained consciousness, Hughes was no longer in the sky. He was lying in a hospital bed. His body was nearly destroyed. Multiple broken bones. Severe burns. Lung damage. Every breath was agony. Every movement required assistance. For a man who had always believed in the power of will, this helplessness was a devastating psychological blow. For the first time in his life, Hughes could not control his own body. The days in the hospital passed slowly. White lights. The smell of disinfectant. The steady hum of machines. Hughes began to fear all contact. Fear of germs. Fear of mistakes. Fear that a single small error could ensure he would never stand again. Painkillers became his constant companion. At first, to endure the pain. Then, to escape it. The suffering was not only physical. It seeped into his mind, amplifying the obsessions that had existed since childhood. When he was finally brought home, Hughes was no longer the man he once was. He closed the doors, drew the curtains, dimmed the lights. Every sound felt too loud. Every small change triggered anxiety. Hughes began enforcing strict rules over his environment: who could enter the room, where they could stand, what they could say, what they could touch. Repetitive rituals emerged: hand-washing, cleaning, arranging. Hughes believed that if everything was kept perfect, he could prevent the next disaster. But perfection brought no peace. It only allowed fear to spread further. His body recovered slowly. His mind never truly did. The accident left a permanent mark, a reminder that human beings are not invincible. That no matter how wealthy or intelligent one may be, a single moment of lost control can destroy everything. Hughes continued to work, continued to make decisions, continued to hold power. But inside, a different Hughes had formed, more fragile, more suspicious, and more afraid than ever before. The sky, once a source of freedom, became a haunting memory. The crash did not only take his health. It took away his belief that the world could be controlled through willpower and technology. From that moment on, Howard Hughes stepped onto a new path. Not a path of exploration, but a path of defense. And the more he defended himself, the further he retreated away from the world he had once longed to conquer. As Howard Hughes gradually disappeared from the public spotlight, his power spread in ways few could see. No longer appearing regularly before the press, Hughes chose to operate in silence. Sealed rooms, unrecorded phone calls, deals that were never made public. As America entered the Cold War, that silence became an advantage. Hughes was not just an industrialist. He controlled technology the government desperately needed: surveillance aircraft, advanced aeronautical designs, projects far beyond the reach of most civilian corporations at the time. And so, the door to the Pentagon opened quietly, but with immense weight. Within the corridors of power, the name Howard Hughes was spoken with caution. He was unpredictable. He did not follow political protocol. But he had money, technology, and a vision the U.S. military was eager for. The CIA took notice of Hughes in their own way. In an era when everything was monitored, having a businessman willing to operate outside public view was invaluable. Hughes Aircraft became a strategic partner in top-secret projects. Classified blueprints, budgets that never appeared in public records, and experiments known to only a handful of people. Hughes rarely attended large meetings, but his opinions carried weight. He understood that in politics, being too visible could be a weakness. So he stayed behind the scenes, where real decisions were made. Yet that power came with suspicion. Hughes began to believe that anyone could betray him, that government agencies both needed him and wanted to control him. He kept notes, stored documents, preserved evidence. Every political relationship became, in his mind, a long-term chess match. Projects were delayed. Costs exceeded limits. Congress began to ask questions. The media started digging deeper. And Hughes, who hated the spotlight, was once again dragged out of the shadows. The hearings were tense. His name filled the newspapers. Accusations of wasted taxpayer money, shadowy relationships, and unaccountable power surfaced. Hughes felt surrounded, not only legally, but psychologically. Instead of confronting the storm, he withdrew even further. Hughes maintained his influence, but through intermediaries, lawyers, assistants, shell companies. He trusted no one completely, yet relied on them to preserve his position. Every relationship was built on control and distance. In the political world, Hughes was neither hero nor villain. He was a tool, and at the same time, the one wielding it. A man standing on the fragile line between power and paranoia. The deeper Hughes moved into the networks of politics and intelligence, the more dangerous the world seemed. Not because of wars abroad, but because of the invisible battle of trust, betrayal, and control. The power he held was real, but so was the price. Every secret kept, every deal made in darkness, pushed Hughes one step farther from a normal life. And as he shut the door tighter against the outside world, no one noticed that Howard Hughes's greatest power no longer lay in technology or politics, but in the fear that now governed every decision he made. No one witnessed the moment Howard Hughes began to fear the world, because it did not come from a single dramatic event. It arrived slowly, quietly, and burrowed into the smallest corners of his thoughts. At first, it was only caution. Hughes feared germs, dirt, the touch of unfamiliar hands on his belongings. He required his staff to wash their hands repeatedly, to clean every surface, to avoid unnecessary contact. At first, these demands sounded eccentric, but still within the bounds of a perfectionist. Then those bounds disappeared. Hughes began writing his own rules. How to open a door, how to fold a towel, how to place a spoon, a knife, a glass of water. Everything had to follow an exact order. Even the slightest deviation sent him into panic. Not anger, but genuine fear. He believed the outside world was invading him, through the air, through light, through other people. Hughes locked himself inside dark rooms, curtains drawn tight, lights off, doors sealed. He did not want to see time passing, did not want to witness day turning into night. In darkness, he felt safer. Those who encountered Hughes later recalled that he spoke very little, his voice hoarse, his sentences fragmented. At times, he would repeat the same phrase dozens of times, as if changing the tone might make the world less dangerous. He did not trust doctors. He did not trust medicine. Whenever he was in pain, he endured it in silence, believing medical treatment itself was a threat. His body weakened. Old injuries from plane crashes never truly healed. Pain lingered dull, constant, day after day. Physical pain merged with mental pain until no clear boundary remained. Hughes drifted out of the rhythm of human life, sleeping during the day, awake at night, eating the same meal for weeks, watching the same film over and over, not out of love, but because it was familiar, predictable, without surprise. Surprise was what he feared most. Friends gradually disappeared. Business partners became voices on the telephone. Family turned into a distant concept. Hughes no longer believed anyone could come close without carrying danger. Money continued to flow. The empire kept running, but the man at the top lived like a shadow. He once controlled entire industries. Now he was controlled by the obsessions inside his own mind. There were nights when Hughes lay motionless for hours in the dark, eyes open, unable to sleep. No grand thoughts, only worry about dust, about germs, about the possibility that someone was watching him. Fear no longer needed a reason. It existed as an undeniable truth. Howard Hughes, the man who once flew higher than anyone else, now dared not step outside his own room, not because he was weak, but because his mind had turned the world into an enemy. And the greatest tragedy was not his loneliness. It was that Hughes believed loneliness was the only way to survive. The final years of Howard Hughes' life were no longer measured in achievements or numbers. They were measured by the number of hotel rooms he passed through, by the thickness of the curtains, by the distance between him and the outside world. Hughes no longer lived in any fixed place. He moved constantly, not in search of new opportunities, but to escape old fears. Las Vegas, the Bahamas, Nicaragua, Mexico. Each location was only a temporary stop for a mind that never found rest. His rooms were always sealed. Windows never opened. Light was blocked out. Staff communicated through handwritten notes. Every instruction was written down, revised, rewritten, and revised again. Howard Hughes, the man who once spoke directly with presidents, no longer trusted himself to look anyone in the eye. His body deteriorated rapidly. Weight dropped away. Skin clung to bone. Hair grew long. Fingernails went uncut. Untreated sores quietly consumed his body. But the greatest pain was not illness. It was the loss of control. The Hughes empire still existed on paper, but real power had left his hands long ago. Lawyers, advisors, managers. They all operated around Hughes not because he issued clear commands, but because they interpreted the fragmented notes he left behind. No one knew what his true intentions were, and no one dared to ask. As Hughes' health visibly declined, a silent battle began. Not in the press, not in courtrooms, but behind closed doors, where documents were copied, altered, and sometimes replaced. Wills appeared, then vanished. Conflicting statements emerged. Signatures were questioned. Who truly represented Howard Hughes? Who was speaking on his behalf? And whether he was still mentally capable of deciding the fate of his vast fortune. Howard Hughes could no longer protect himself. The man who once controlled everything had become the center of schemes he could no longer see. In 1976, aboard a medical flight, Howard Hughes took his final breath. Not in a mansion, not in a familiar bedroom, but in the sky suspended between destinations. When his body was brought down, the world was stunned, not by his death, but by what remained of the legend. No one recognized him at first. Howard Hughes, the symbol of power, now resembled an anonymous figure forgotten by time. His death did not close the story. It opened a far more chaotic chapter. The battle over his estate erupted. Hundreds claimed to be heirs. Lawsuits dragged on for years. Fake and real wills intertwined, capturing the attention of the entire nation. An empire built on vision and will was now torn apart by greed and legal conflict. Howard Hughes died alone. No family at his side. No friends to see him off. Only a vast fortune and an unanswered question. Did he conquer the world? Or, in the end, did the world conquer him? After Howard Hughes passed away, America was forced to look back at the man it had once admired, feared, and obsessively wondered about. Not just a billionaire. Not just a genius. But a mirror reflecting both the brightest and darkest sides of the American dream. Hughes left an indelible mark on aviation, cinema, and the defense industry. Record-breaking flights. Technologies far ahead of their time. Decisions that reshaped how America looked to the skies and entered war. But his greatest legacy was not found in airplanes or films. It lay in the story of absolute power and the price it demands. Howard Hughes proved that one person could reach heights beyond imagination, and could also fall into profound isolation the moment everything was achieved. He had wealth enough to buy almost anything, but not peace of mind. He wielded power capable of influencing governments, but he could not control the fear within himself. America remembers Hughes as a legend, and also as a warning. That success does not always mean happiness. That controlling the world does not mean mastering oneself. The story of Howard Hughes did not end with his death. It lives on in debates about wealth, ambition, and mental health. In a question every generation must answer for itself. If you had everything, who would you become? A free person, or a prisoner of the fears you create? And when the lights go out, when power fades, what truly remains beside you? Fortune, fame, or only silence? Howard Hughes left America an empire, but he also left behind a profound question, one that, even today, still has no complete answer.